completely shut down Nick Bosa again. And
You good
that's,
now?
yeah, there we go. We
There we
got him
go.
back. Good to see you, buddy.
Nice to see you guys too, man.
Um, yeah, talking offensive line, that's where Jody was going. So I'll let him get in. But I was just talking about Lane shutting down Nick Bosa and then Trent Williams, dude. Where is he in your pantheon of left tackles? Because he is from somebody on the outside. That dude's unbelievable.
You got the two best tackles in the league we saw on display this last Sunday. Unbelievable players. In fact, I say Trent Williams has probably been the most dominant tackle since probably Munoz.
I was going to go, you go Munoz? Because that's how far back you got to go.
Yeah, I mean, even better than, what I saw from, guys like Tony Baselli. I mean, Trent Williams is dominant. Lane Johnson is dominant. And there's two different contrasting styles. You just got a street fight, a bar strike with Williams. And then you got a technician who's just so technically sound with Lane Johnson. Understand he's got to get out there first, set up, and be ready to battle at the point of contact. And then you got a guy, he's just bringing everything in the kitchen sink to the point of contact with Williams. I mean, it was the best game I've seen out of two tackles in a long time. I mean, them two actually beat up on the guys they played against. It was a great game with those two. But, I get all geeked up with those type of, those.
I'm with you. I've never seen Lane got Bosa with a spin move, Barrett. Did you see that? I've never seen that before. Yeah.
No, he spun, then counter spun, and then finished the play.
Yeah.
Which was disheartening to me because when you look at the way this offensive line played, I mean, they were averaging like 3.8 seconds a pass play.
I know.
And we still didn't get anybody open. Which goes to show,
Jalen had all day. And he for some reason, he didn't want to pull the trigger. Like, Jack Stoll was open at one point. Albert was open at one. Now, these aren't playmakers. Maybe he doesn't trust them. I don't know, but something was off with Jalen Hurts.
Well, Smitty was open on that on the exact same play we're talking about with the spin, counter spin, still get his hands high, slow him down. Smitty was open in the initial of the play. The play was supposed to go. It was designed for him, and he just didn't get the ball to him. He should have just thrown it before all that stuff even happened. And that's, we talk about being able to counter somebody's counter. Look at the 49ers. The 49ers went out there the first two drives and try to drop back pass this Eagles defense. And what happens? 3 and out, 3 and out. So what does Shanahan do? He counters that by going out and then running play action, not to try to pull the linebackers up with the run or fake the run, but it's a solid protection when you use play action because you leave a tight end in and you leave a running back in, and then they can leak out later on if they need them for, to dump it off. Well, that's what they did. They brought more blockers in and then leaked those guys out, and they got lost in the responsibility of the defense because, number one, they had all that window dressing, guys going in motion, everything else. But then they turned back around and used them as outlets for Purdy, which allowed that defensive line not to be effective because, number one, they had got chipping on them, double teaming them. And then when they finally did get to the quarterback, they had an outlet for him because those guys stopped blocking and turned around, became an outlet and dump off pass for him.
All right, maybe you partially answered the question I was going to ask, which is fine. Prior to the game, advantage in the matchups, Eagles, their defensive line against the 49er offensive line for anyone not named Trent Williams. That's where the Eagles should have been able to score points, take advantage of the Didn't happen. More credit to those other four nameless schmoes who were the worst players on the San Francisco offense, or what the hell to the Eagles defensive line who didn't make any plays? We'll cut Sweat some slack because he's up against the Hall of Famer. How about the rest of the Eagles defensive line? Give credit to the opposition, and did they play over their heads, or did the Eagles underachieve on the D line?
I think it's more so a little bit of game planning.
A little bit of both, but you make a call. One more than the other. Which way?
Game planning. They ran stuff in which they had extra blockers. And when you do that, it's hard to get your quarterback, get pressure on them.
Then who in the secondary? I'm sorry to interrupt, Barry. Who in the secondary? Where were they playing? In the parking lot?
No,
San Francisco's keeping extra guys in the block, and yet every pass Purdy threw was to a wide open guy. How the hell do you not get up and play on somebody if you know they're keeping extra guys in the block?
Because I mean, once again, we got our game plan. They sent 4. They rushed 4 and dropped everybody else.
Yeah.
They dropped everybody else. They had everybody in coverage. And since they did that, they weren't able to generate enough pressure on Purdy, number one. And then they, with all the window dressing, all the motions, all the, going across the formation, they confused those guys in the secondary. Like Blankenship didn't have a clue. He was lost in the sauce the entire game.
Yeah.
They were trying to play a zone, and they weren't matching up in the zone. Guys were running scot-free through the zone because they didn't know what their responsibilities were. They didn't use their fundamental techniques, their fundamental understanding of the play to help them out. And they got away from doing what they do best, and that's taking one play at a time. Instead of them trying to just do their job, they were trying to do everybody else's job and didn't get their job done. As a middle linebacker, you got to look at the triangle. You go from you to the 2 guards, to the quarterback. Well, as you can see, Morrow's looking everywhere but that. You look at the slot corner. I mean, slot corner comes up, Roby comes up, and has a chance to really open up and kill Purdy on the play. But instead, he bounces off of him like, oh, man, he's a pretty big guy. Or, he's a little tougher than I thought, and doesn't bring down a quarterback. Come on now. Come on.
Yeah. He's bigger than people realize, I think, bro,
exactly.
for whatever reason.
But you can't sell him short. You got to go out there and try to annihilate who's ever in front of you. And he didn't do it.
But let me ask you this, Barrett, because I think you're right 100%. But how does Sean Desai not know this? We know coming in, San Francisco is going to try to get the ball out. Everybody tries to get the ball out against this Eagles team because they're a little bit wary of the pass rush typically. We know they're playmakers. You want to get the ball to McCaffrey and Samuel in space. Slay treated Brandon Ayuk like he was Randy Moss in his prime. He's playing in the parking lot.
Right.
And then George Kittle's George Kittle in the middle of the field. They knew this coming in. How do they not know the ball's coming out? They're 214 yards after catch. They're not tackling.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
and that's another thing. Fundamentally, they just didn't tackle. I saw the back and forth with Slay and
Ayuk.
Huh?
Ayuk or
no, going between Slay and Seth Joyner.
Oh, Seth. Yeah, Seth.
Seth talked about their tackle.
Oh yeah, not tackling. Yeah. Now they're not afraid. I agree with Slay. They're not afraid, but they just didn't.
But they didn't do it though. You didn't do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't come up and tackle. You weren't doing that. I mean, just little things. They were running like a cover 3 shell, and they had Brown inside the box. In that coverage, he has the flats. That's his responsibility. But he sees the receiver, Brandon Ayuk, go through the middle of the field. Go past the middle of the field. He locks onto him. Why are you locking on to him? He's not your responsibility. Once he goes inside, he's not yours. You got to get to your flat area. And what happens on that play? They run a play action, and Kittle goes out to the flat area. They dump it to Kittle. Kittle gets like a 20-yard run on the play. If he'd have been out there in his responsibility instead of latching on to a guy that's not his in the area that's not what he's designed to be at, he could have been there for at least a 6-yard tackle at least. He'd have tackled him instead of the 20 yards he gets and they go down and score on the play. Those are the little things, not being fundamentally sound. In cover 3, you've got flats. Get your butt to the flat area. Don't try to be the hero. It's a design play. If somebody's leaving, there's going to be somebody else to replace that guy. And understanding that in your responsibility, that's how you play fundamentally sound. Just do your job. And it looked like Morrow was beat on the play. It wasn't even Morrow's man. In fact, Morrow should have had the guy that was coming across in his area. He should have latched on to him. And then Brown should have went out to the flat area and he'd have had Kittle. So those little things that are happening that they're just not being responsible for it. Oh, by the way, those receivers were pretty damn physical also. They were blocking them. In fact, I saw Blankenship get put on his ass a couple
Oh
times.
man, did you see Kittle get the 2 blocks? Kittle's a problem, man.
He is a serious
Man.
problem. But I will say this, in saying all of that, now they have to rewind. Now this team has to go out and say, all right, we're not as good as we thought we are. Now we have to get back to fundamental football. Get back to what made us the great team we know we are. Crossing our T's, dotting our I's, making sure there's a little more film study, understanding what your job is, not worried about anybody else's job is. Those are all fundamental things that this team has to go back and correct. Yes, you can correct those things while you're winning, but do you really put a lot of attention on it? Do you really think that, oh, wow, I'll be able to do this? Or do you just go out there and do it? And at this point, they didn't go out there and do it against this team. Yes, that's a great team they played against. And if you ask me what their ranking is 1A, 1B, not a 1 and 2. They're not the best team in the NFL, but I think they're on an even line with the Eagles. You know what I'm saying? I think they are. Even though they beat us, I still think the Eagles have a dominant roster. And man for man, the Eagles have more talent. It's just Shanahan out-coached us in this game. But the worst thing about this, they out-physicaled us and made us get away from our brand of football and play into their hands. That's what they did against this team.
All right, Barrett, I'm going under over here with my next question. The number is 17.5. And the question is number of targets for CD Lamb. When the Eagles played the Cowboys previous this year, they threw it to him 16 times. 16 times to one player. And John said after the game, I would have given it to him 20 times. They can't cover him. Why not just keep feeding them? I said, yeah, but they're never going to do 16 again. Since the Eagles game, 16 targets, 14 targets, and this past week against Seattle, 17. They threw it to him one more time. You don't target a guy 18 times in a game. That's the number. 17.5. Got to get to 18. Will the Cowboys throw it to CD Lamb 18 times this week? I'm going over. How about you?
I'm going with the over also because he's unstoppable. At this point, his understanding where he fits in that offense is impeccable. The relationship that he has with Dak is getting him the ball. Let me put it like this. He had 191 yards against this Eagles defense. 191. He wanted that game to last forever because he was just unstoppable. Now, they were yards in which he wasn't scoring, but still, he was driving. I mean, they could dump to him. He was running all over the field, especially the interior. He got most of the stuff on the interior, not on the outside, but then the interior of the defense, matching up against our guys that we feel as though aren't up to par. Kevin Barrett has
that. But that was an Eli Rick, Sidney Brown game. So at least you have Bradley Roby, which, it's not great, but he knows how to play. Whereas Eli and Sidney are young players playing out of position against CD Lamb. That was
191 yards.
Yeah,
and
that was
Ferguson had his best game against us also. I think Ferguson had like 61 yards.
Yeah, Ferguson had a great game as well.
He
You're right.
70. Yeah, I think he had 71 yards.
You and I talked about this last year all the time. I'm not a big fan of the defensive scheme. Yeah, it was a hell of a lot better. I'm going to get the Eagles fans riled up. It was a hell of a lot better when Jonathan Gannon was here with C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps and company than it is right now. But you mentioned that matchup zone, guys miscommunicating, Sidney Brown, young player, not understanding his responsibility. Do you got to get a little simplify this for younger players? Now they have Roby now and Byard and Slay and Bradbury. It should be getting better, but it's not getting better. Now, part of that is the competition as well. But man, there's so many miscommunication issues with this particular scheme.
TJ Edwards too, man. I mean,
yeah. I'm a huge TJ guy.
Right. He's a homegrown talent, undrafted, and we developed him in our system. You should have gave that young man whatever he wanted because that's where we lack the most experience. That's where we lack the most as far as, playing knowledge in that defense. He understood what his job was and how to play in the middle of that defense. I think that's one of the hardest positions to really bring a guy up to the fold because they don't value it, number one. They're not going to allocate resources to it, number two. And we need somebody there that's a boss. Now, we got somebody coming right now. Will he be able to play? If he's healthy, he's probably one of the best linebackers in the league. But at the end of the day, he's got to be healthy. We got to understand that, Leonard, Shaq Leonard is a baller when he's healthy. There's a reason why he was let go at this point in the season.
Yeah.
Not healthy.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. But, anything's an upgrade for – because I like Ellis. Ellis, to me, is a good player, a good future player. But we don't have time right now to groom guys. We need guys to come in and play now. We need guys to be sufficient now at the linebacker position. We are so weak in the middle of our defense that teams are –
but that's what I'm saying. So line up and play cover two. It's boring.
Basically.
It's boring, but guys are going to not make as many mistakes. You got the front, in theory, and when they start playing better.
Yeah, do your job.
Yeah.
That's it. Make it vanilla, you know what I'm saying? And when you look at basically what the 49ers did to us, it wasn't exotic. It wasn't a lot of blitzes. They rushed 4 guys against us and dropped everybody else, made Jalen Hurts try to beat us in zone coverage. We'll make other quarterbacks do the same thing, beat us in zone coverage. Because as long as you're doing your job in that coverage, that too high zone, if you're doing your job, is meant to stop whatever you throw. You can throw anything at that, and it's built to stop it because you got somebody in that zone. Now, can they match up zone that? You're going to have to do a little bit of that. But at this point, we need to stop the bleeding. We got to get fundamental football as the basis of our defense again. And sometimes, just being vanilla like that and being fundamentally sound is how you really generate what you need as far as stopping teams. We have enough up front to pass rush and generate pressure on the quarterback. We have enough up front. And if they start doing all those, run action, keeping blitzers in, and keeping people to stop the blitz and everything, we can get past that because now you got guys in position to make plays in the secondary. But sometimes it's the kiss technique. Keep it simple, stupid. That's it. Just kiss them.
All right, I'll go down the kiss road with you because I think this is pretty simple, but not everybody does. 2-part question. Number one, why do you think the Eagles think that Kenny Gainwell on any given game should get more carries than DeAndre Swift? And if you agree with the Eagles coaching staff on their philosophy that derives to that answer, feel free to say so. If not, what would Barrett Brooks do? This past week, Gainwell carried it more than DeAndre Swift. I'm perplexed by it. Why do you think the Eagles think along those lines? Are they right to?
No. How? We're talking about a guy, one of the most explosive players on the team. Swift, there's no way Swift should be off the field, period. You say we don't have a bell cow back. Well, we need to change that. He's explosive. He can run in between the tackles. When he's given the opportunity to get lathered up and play, that's one of our problems right there. We got the best offensive line of football that can run block just as well as they pass block. But use run block, run block so they can go out there and tee off on people, hit people. Number one, what does it do for you? It keeps their offense off the field. A 3-yard run is not a bad thing. You do that 4 times, you got a first down. So why do we think that, that it's cool to not run guys? And Swift should not have less than 5 carries, not just in the first half, but I'm talking the first quarter, just to set the tone, show them they mean business. They absolutely put teams too high up on the list of being people that can stop their running game when they don't run it. They can run the ball on anybody. This offensive line is built. This would have been a great game for us to run the ball on them simply because it kind of takes away their strength. Their strength is in the middle of their defense, their linebackers. If they could have gotten Kelsey, gotten Juergens up on their second level and run the ball consistently, they'd have ran all over that defense. But instead, they gave them a little bit of power, and they took advantage of it, and then out-physicaled us up front. Not up front, but out-physicaled us in the run lanes. And then, it was over after that. You had guys, hitting guys, standing over them, and talking trash and everything. And
well, Fred Warner's pretty good. Yeah, I will say this. Now, I saw John Lynch and Howie Roseman talking before the game, Those are the two GMs who probably put together the two best rosters in the NFL, Barrett.
No question.
But it's you look at it, and obviously San Francisco has the luxury Philadelphia used to have, in that they've got a quarterback they don't have to pay like the Eagles had for a while with Jalen Hurts. But they have, if you look at the two positions the Eagles devalue, and from a macro sense, I agree with the Eagles, running back and linebacker. And then you look at San Francisco, and they have the best running back and the best linebacker.
Yeah.
And I mean that literally. The number one running back in this league, Christian McCaffrey. The number one linebacker, all-ball linebacker, to me, is Fred Warner.
No question.
The Eagles, we're watching Nick Morrow, and I get this DeAndre Swift love. Remember, DeAndre carried the ball 6 times for 13 yards. Kenny Gainwell only carried it 2 times for 5 yards. When they did run it, there was no success. And Jason Kelsey said after the game, Barrett, he was honest. Jason. He said, but he's kind of defending Brian Johnson. He's like, I wouldn't run the ball either. We were having no success, basically.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Jason, I'm throwing a BS flag. He's being a teammate. He's sticking up for his guys. He's doing what Sean Desai did yesterday, taking all the bullets. It was on us. They didn't have Barrett. You can speak to this. You're a former offensive lineman. You got to get a rhythm. You got to be able to build it up. You got to be able to get into a flow. They never gave them a chance to get into a flow. The foreplay, how many did you describe, John? How many rushes did they have?
They had 9 rushes from the running backs for a total
the whole
of 20
game.
yards.
How do we know if they could or couldn't run the ball that day?
But then
9 rushes.
Well,
that's
then
the farce right there.
Yeah,
that's the farce right there. If it's the war of attrition when you're running the ball. Yeah. You're gonna run it, and it's not like you're banging your head against the wall. You're running it and you're tenderizing. It's not banging head against the wall. You're tenderizing the defense. All of a sudden, they start getting up a little bit slower. They start reading things a little bit differently from a passing standpoint because they know you're going to come off and hit them in the mouth. It's you get 1 yard here, 3 yards here, 4 yards here, and eventually it starts turning into 6 yards. It starts turning to 10 yards, turning to 12 yards. That's what running the ball does. It's not just automatically going to be all right. You look at the game plan that they changed their game plan up. Eagles got to do the same thing. You've got to run the ball because when you run the ball, it keeps the ball out of that other quarterback's hands. Until we go back to fundamental football, and that's running the rock consistently, it's going to be an extra long season, and we're going to have teams playing us close. Even the Giants may play us close. Because we don't run the ball with them. It could be a long game for us.
Well, now I'll end it there with you, Barrett. Good to see you again. At B Brooks 72 NBCS. You can follow Barrett on X. Twitter does a tremendous job with NBC Sports Philadelphia covering this team. Look, I'm with you 100%. When you run the ball 9 times as a running back in any game, that's pathetic. You got to run it more. But as a player, games have personalities. And they had that first quarter, they dominated, and they only got 2 field goals. If those are 2 touchdowns, I think this is a completely different game. I really believe that. Really believe that.
Absolutely. And it'll be Brock Purdy playing from behind.
Yeah.
He's not used to playing from behind.
And all of a sudden, it was that dichotomy. The first quarter, the Eagles dominated. They had 2 scoring opportunities, 6 points. 49ers dominated. Second quarter, 2 scoring opportunities, 2 touchdowns. You go into halftime, they get the football back right down the field and score. And then it's 21-6. And they abandon the running game. Should they have? Maybe not to the degree they did, but it's really difficult when you're down 2 scores and you're like, Fred Warner's over on the other side. I mean, what am I going to bang my head in the wall? 2 yards at that point. So I think the Dom drive, I told this to Jody on Monday, the Dom drive, as I'm calling it, they scored on that drive.
Absolutely.
So Big Dom fired him up. Connor Barwin's giving him high fives. The whole place is cheering Dom as he leaves the field. He gets kicked out, and the defense goes back out there 5 plays. Bang, Deebo Samuel,
Right down the
48
field.
yards. I mean, you can't run the ball at that point is all I'm saying. You can't run the ball at that point. And I think a large part of it was how the game's personality. And the defense just didn't hold its water. And that affected the running game.
But Jody, look at this. If you're a zebra, you can't change your stripes. So if
That's
you
true.
really are a fundamentally sound running team, you can't allow another team to take you off your square. You got to stand in your square. You got to run the ball when you want to run the ball. You set the tone early. Run the rock early. They chose to come out and pass the ball, and I understand because the weak point of that defense was the secondary, and I get it. But
Ward's a good player, though. I love Ward. I think he's
Ward. He's gonna shut down whoever's in front of him.
Yeah.
But they got Smitty. They got others that can go out there and play. Like, just to your point, this would have been a great tight end game. Or this would have been Dallas Goedert's one of his best games if he was there, because he'd have been the guy roaming around the middle of that defense, making things happen. Goddard would have been special in that secondary, secondary and where the linebacker level is. He would have been great there, because then they couldn't do everything that they did from a pass rushing standpoint, because they had plenty of time to throw the ball. They just didn't attack the middle of the field. Whenever they attacked the middle of the field with slants, drag routes, and comebacks, you saw how good A.J. Brown looked. They couldn't stop him, but we stopped running routes. We wanted to run routes where we could beat them over the top and get a big play. You can't play big play football all the time. You got to go out there and nickel and dime the defense. And Nick Sirianni said it himself. Well, you can't always think that you can go down there and nickel and dime a team and drive the ball down the field that way. Well, that works. That's a fundamental way you have to think, because number one, it keeps that defense off the field, their defense on the field, keeps our defense off the field, keeps their offense off the field. But number two, it takes the clock down. Number three, this is a physical brand of football when you're doing that.
I heard
we got out physical. We let them dictate tempo to us. They put it on us, and that's the most disheartening thing I saw on Sunday.
I heard you, Douglas, on WIP yesterday described the 49er DBs as sticky. They were stuck all over the Eagle wide receivers. And then there's Darius Slay, who's playing in the parking lot. Darius, get up and be sticky this week.
Oh, don't call him Darius. You're going to get in Seth's territory. Don't call him Darius.
And Bradbury. Oh, I'm not giving Bradbury a pass. You're going to be sticky this week too, Bradbury. I've gotten bent over backwards.
By the way,
before he ever put out an Eagle uniform, I was calling for him to play. And oh, by the way, he hasn't had a great year either. So Bradbury and Slay, both guys, a little stickiness this week against the Cowboy wide receiver.
Interesting note.
Tell him to be sticky.
Interesting note. We now have 2 Dariuses.
They didn't want to be called Darius.
Slay and Leonard. Yeah, and they both hate their first names. Yes. Interesting. Interesting piece of trivia.
We got you covered, Shaq. And we got Barrett Brooks back on with us. I'm Barrett.
Don't call me Barrett. Call me Pork Chop. Don't call me
Pork Chop. The big Pork Chop. The big Pork Chop. Barrett Brooks here with us. Now that you were foolish enough to say yes when we asked you on the show, we're going to ask you again, right?
No, no problem. You guys are my guys.
Thanks, Barrett. I appreciate it, bud.
NBC Sports, Philly, Barrett Brooks here with us on Birds 365. All right, Mac and Mac coming back. We got to put a bow on the show. Stay right there.